when folks wanted to trip up Jesus about the law, they asked him what the greatest commandment was. And he said, it's this, that you love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It went on to say, because that seemed to be troubling for those who were religious folk, well, who is my neighbor? And to explain who the neighbor was, Jesus went on to explain that it was their enemy acting like a neighbor. In other words, Jesus was saying there is no barrier, there is no border, there is no separation. All people are our neighbors. And so we heard in those scriptures that Regina read for us that we may not see God, but we can see God's love embodied in one another. Unfortunately, we know we live in a world where that does not often take center stage. I think it's interesting, as always, that when we chose to talk about this particular passage, as we talked about this journey through Lent, getting at what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus Christ, that the passages about love and love of neighbor come at this special anniversary for our nation. It began because black folk had begun to organize for the right to vote. Voter registration was the issue, and that was troubling. Because if a majority of the folks voted, that meant that the white power establishment would lose throughout the Jim Crow South. The trouble got so bad that a judge actually ordered an order making it illegal for more than 3 people to gather if their name was on a certain list or if they were connected with a number of organizations, if they were involved in the voter registration drive. And then on March 7th, in 1965, the young organizers tried to march from Selma to Montgomery to demand change. To change voter intimidation, to change the laws of segregation, to change the heart and the soul of the Jim Crow laws. And when those peaceful, young protesters marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they were attacked by state troopers and sheriffs. They were breaking the law. But the law had to be changed. For some here in this room today, this event predates our birth. That lets you know I wasn't born then. The closest some of us will ever come is to hear the stories from others. Others in this room will never forget what's called Bloody Sunday. Where you were, what you were thinking, and what was going on. And for others, you might have wondered why on earth they were doing it anyway, even gathered in this place. Why did those young people put themselves in harm's way? If we are to be church, we have to be honest about those places in ourselves. As all the folks gathered, we know there were some who chose not to, but I'm not getting into that. But all the folks gathered yesterday to hear speeches and to gather and then celebrate this event. We have to stop and recognize that not everybody was happy about what was going on. Some folks thought they were acting too radical. And that didn't fall just along racial lines. So when we stop to cheer these moments in our history, we have to be honest with ourselves and with one another that sometimes we have been on the wrong side of history. I've heard some folks recently say that nothing's really changed since that time. Most of those folks weren't alive when this happened, and that may have something to do with why they say it. To those folks, I want to say this. Remember that it was a black president who was standing on that bridge yesterday, giving an amazing speech, by the way. If you haven't heard it, you need to find it. Who was commemorating Bloody Sunday. These were the same folks who were fighting just to get the vote. So you can't say that nothing has changed in 50 years. Imagine those folks who were gathered on that day. Could they have even imagined that 50 years down the road that there would be a black president? And to those who have said everything has changed, that we really need to move beyond the conversations about race and racism and that which divides us, I say you need to read the recent Department of Justice report. As we gather on this historic weekend to talk about this historic event in time in American history, we also know that there's much to change. Even Congressman John Lewis, who was there, 25 years old, 25 years old at the head of that march, has said we have come a long way, but there is still much work to be done. And I'm convinced on this day when we talk about what does it mean to follow Jesus, what does it mean to embody the love of Jesus Christ, if there ever was someone who understood what it meant to try and embody the love of Jesus Christ, it was Congressman Lewis. It is without a doubt, he said, his faith that took him to that place, that made him stand up with others to make a change. Today, we are talking about what does it mean to be driven by the love of God. In order to do that, we just have to stop for a minute and look at his witness. Love embodied means facing down people who might hate you. Facing down people who don't want you around. Facing down people who might not even think you're fully human. And then not giving back to them what they have given to you. Instead of revenge, which is really just our human sense of justice, you know what that means. Making sure that everyone else gets what they deserve and we get grace. I'll let that sink in. Instead of revenge, it's a decision that in the end, we won't be run off by anyone who wants you gone. What they did on that day said, we are not going away, and they were part of the long work for justice. And that work is not over. And we know that to be true. Love looks like marching towards justice when faced with concussions, broken bones, bombed churches, and dead children. Even when the law stands against you, and still standing strong and true. That's what love looks like in action. Because at the end of the day, what they did was not just about themselves, but about saving the soul of a nation. That was what they talked about. Yes, it was about the vote, but it was about saving the soul of the nation. Because we know that that kind of denial of justice is nothing but rooted in evil. Love means giving up, friends, also our indifference. Or worse, our cynicism that believes nothing will ever change. Love means exchanging our complaints and our criticisms for plans and movements and willingness to do something within our circle of control. John Lewis said of this weekend, don't give up on the things of great meaning to you. Don't get lost in a sea of despair. Stand up for what you believe. He also said that one of the things that drove him to the point of standing up was that he knew that it was not enough, and I'm quoting now, it was not enough to come and listen to a great sermon or a message every Sunday morning and be confined to those four walls and those four corners. You had to get up and get out and do something. In other words, people of faith need to be involved in the ongoing struggle. And there are some significant struggles. For those who have not had the opportunity to read that 100-page report or to see the anecdotes that have popped out, 1/3 of the residents of Ferguson we know are white, 85%. Of all the police stops between 2012 and 2014 were African American. 90% of the citations, 93% of the arrests, And what they said in the report is that it looked like there were little or no reason in the paperwork behind the stops other than vague suspicions, or what we know as driving while black. And here's the two that got me most. African Americans are charged more violations than their white counterparts, and black people were 26% less likely to have contraband in their vehicles. Do you get that? It's okay to laugh, because if we don't, we might cry or fall into despair. But here's the thing is, we already knew all this. Was anyone surprised by this report? No. So why is it important? It's important because someone finally came along and said, we've got facts. Before long, when we talk about driving while black, someone would stand up and go, well, that's just in your experience. It doesn't happen to everybody. It's just your opinion. Now, it can't be dismissed as just simple opinion. We have it documented. They didn't even try to hide it. What does that tell you, my friends? Because they didn't think anyone would care. Do you get that? Somebody has to care. Somebody has to get mad. Somebody has to stand up. Somebody has to say, this is wrong. Because I'm convinced if no one had taken to the streets, maybe the Department of Justice would have never shown up. It takes action. And then let's talk about the courts. My favorite story of the week is the good old boy Judge Ronald Brockmeyer. Fixed tickets for people. Owes over $100,000 in taxes, but he was sending people to jail because they couldn't pay their traffic violation, $75 tickets. And he doesn't see why this is a problem, because he's not the only one. This isn't just about Ferguson, and we know it to be true. Some of us have experience with courts on various levels, either inside or outside. We know that this is the way it works. We got to stop being silent. We have to speak and organize and stand up. Because this is what it means to live out our faith, to embody this love. It's not enough to get angry, because anger will only take us so far. It's not enough to say that doesn't affect me, because frankly, I don't understand how Christians could say that. Jesus says, come and follow. What it means is we've got to move beyond just talking about God's love. Being embodied by God's love in the shadow of Selma, in the shadow of Ferguson. What does this mean for us as a church? That's why I'm supposed to turn to a whole set of things that I've got in mind that we need to be doing, but I think you know well enough that I don't have it, and I'm not arrogant enough to believe it. But the truth is, we've got to speak out. Look for the places where there are lights and join with other folks who are already organizing and doing things out of love. And here's the hard part. It's easy to be angry. It's easy to indict people who are part of the system, because the truth is, while I just picked on the poor judge, he's also a product of a system that he didn't think was anything wrong with it. Somewhere along the line, he learned it was all right because this is just what everybody did. So we've got to be careful about demonizing any one person or profession. Jesus said, come and follow me, not to fight against enemies, but to bring about a new day. In our communities, in our sessions, in our parking lot, our email, our late-night phone call conversation, it's time for us to use our abilities and talents to figure out how to stand against this. And I'm not talking about mass movement out of this place necessarily, but who knows what can happen. What I'm talking about is in each one of our lives, we have a circle of influence. Each one of us in this room have people that we have influence over and with. And that's where we've gotten to start. When somebody you know says something you know isn't true, don't let them get away with it. Figure out a way in love to call them to account. When someone around you has lost heart and says it doesn't matter, there's nothing we can do, it's your call to inspire them again. It amazes me, and I know I've talked about him a number of times, but Congressman John Lewis, all these days later, can sound like he's hopeful that change is possible. Even as he said, I've seen us go backwards in some ways, but he is still hopeful. How much more do we need to be? In your circle of influence, think about ways that you can influence people who do have positions of power. Each one of us has way more power than we think or believe. To embody the faith of Jesus Christ, to fully embody the love of Jesus Christ. This is what our calling is all about. Acting in love. Acting in love. Knowing we are part of a grand story that started long before any of us in the room, not just those of us born after 65, were around. And it will go on long afterwards. So we better make sure we're teaching the children our love for justice and our faith in Jesus Christ.